In the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean during World War II, beneath the rolling waves that stretched endlessly toward the horizon, a revolutionary form of warfare was taking shape. The year 1943 marked a turning point in naval combat, where traditional surface engagements gave way to something far more sinister and effective. Japanese merchant captains and naval officers would soon discover that their greatest threat came not from the skies above or the surface vessels they could see approaching, but from the silent depths below. The USS Tang, designated SS-306, represented the pinnacle of American submarine engineering and tactical innovation. This Balao-class submarine emerged from Mare Island Naval Shipyard on August 17, 1943, as one of the most advanced underwater vessels ever constructed. Her sleek hull, measuring 311 feet in length, cut through the water with deadly precision, while her advanced sonar systems and sophisticated torpedo-firing mechanisms made her a formidable predator in the Pacific theater. The submarine's commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander Richard O'Kane, brought to the Tang an unprecedented level of experience and tactical brilliance. Having served as executive officer aboard the legendary USS Wahoo under the command of the equally famous Dudley "Mush" Morton, O'Kane had participated in 5 previous war patrols that had already established him as one of the most capable submarine officers in the United States Navy. His understanding of Japanese shipping patterns, convoy behaviors, and naval tactics would prove instrumental in the Tang's extraordinary success. When the Tang received her commission on October 15, 1943, the Pacific War had reached a critical juncture. Japanese supply lines stretched across thousands of miles of ocean, connecting the home islands to conquered territories throughout Southeast Asia and the Central Pacific. These supply routes represented the lifeblood of the Japanese war effort, carrying everything from crude oil and raw materials to troops and military equipment. The vulnerability of these extended supply lines would become increasingly apparent as American submarine warfare tactics evolved and improved. The strategic importance of submarine warfare in the Pacific cannot be overstated. By 1943, American naval planners had recognized that traditional surface engagements, while spectacular and decisive in certain circumstances, could not single-handedly strangle the Japanese war machine. The vast distances involved in Pacific operations meant that sustained campaigns against Japanese shipping required vessels capable of operating independently for extended periods, far from friendly bases and support facilities. American submarine construction during this period reflected lessons learned from the early war years, when mechanical problems and faulty torpedoes had severely hampered underwater operations. The Balao-class submarines, like the Tang, incorporated numerous improvements over earlier designs, including stronger hull construction for deeper diving capabilities, more reliable diesel engines for extended surface operations, and enhanced crew comfort systems that allowed for longer patrols in hostile waters. The crew complement aboard the Tang consisted of 10 officers and 80 enlisted personnel, each man specially trained for the unique challenges of submarine warfare. These sailors represented an elite segment of the United States Navy, having volunteered for submarine duty despite its acknowledged dangers and rigorous training requirements. The mortality rate among submarine crews during World War II would eventually reach 22%, making it the most dangerous assignment in the American armed forces. Training for submarine operations involved months of intensive instruction in everything from torpedo loading procedures to emergency escape techniques. Crew members learned to operate in the confined spaces of their underwater vessel while maintaining peak efficiency during combat situations that could last for hours or even days. The psychological demands of submarine warfare, including the constant threat of depth charge attacks and the claustrophobic conditions inherent in underwater operations, required exceptional mental fortitude. The Tang's armament consisted of 24 Mark XIV torpedoes, weapons that had undergone significant improvements since the early war period when mechanical defects had plagued American submarine operations. These torpedoes, when properly functioning, could deliver devastating damage to enemy vessels, capable of breaking the back of large merchant ships or crippling military vessels with single hits. The submarine also carried a 5-inch deck gun for surface engagements, though this weapon would see limited use during the Tang's combat operations. Navigation in the Pacific presented unique challenges for submarine commanders. The vast ocean expanses, often lacking distinctive landmarks or navigational aids, required precise celestial navigation skills and careful dead reckoning to maintain accurate position information. Submarines operating in enemy-controlled waters could not surface during daylight hours to take navigational fixes, forcing crews to rely on sophisticated periscope observations and radio navigation aids when available. Intelligence gathering played a crucial role in submarine operations throughout the Pacific theater. American code-breaking efforts, particularly the successful decryption of Japanese naval communications, provided submarine commanders with invaluable information about enemy ship movements, convoy schedules, and routing patterns. This intelligence advantage allowed submarines like the Tang to position themselves along enemy shipping routes with remarkable precision. The Japanese merchant marine at this stage of the war remained largely unprotected by effective convoy systems. Unlike the Atlantic theater, where German U-boat depredations had forced the Allies to develop sophisticated convoy protection measures, Japanese naval doctrine had failed to adequately address the growing submarine threat to their merchant shipping. This oversight would prove catastrophic as American submarine operations intensified throughout 1943 and 1944. Japanese naval strategy during the early war years had focused primarily on surface fleet actions and carrier-based aviation, with relatively little attention paid to the protection of merchant shipping. This strategic miscalculation reflected a fundamental misunderstanding of the nature of industrial warfare, where the ability to maintain supply lines often proved more critical than individual tactical victories in isolated engagements. The industrial capacity of the United States during this period allowed for the rapid construction and deployment of submarines throughout the Pacific theater. American shipyards were producing new submarines at an unprecedented rate, with each vessel incorporating the latest technological improvements and tactical innovations. This production capability gave American naval commanders the luxury of assigning multiple submarines to coordinated operations while maintaining sufficient vessels for individual patrol missions. As the Tang prepared for her first war patrol in early 1944, the stage was set for a series of engagements that would fundamentally alter Japanese perceptions of the submarine threat. The combination of superior American technology, improved tactics, enhanced intelligence capabilities, and experienced personnel created the perfect conditions for devastating attacks on Japanese shipping throughout the Central Pacific region. The psychological impact of submarine warfare on Japanese merchant marine personnel had already become evident by late 1943, as reports of sudden devastating attacks began to circulate throughout Japanese shipping circles. Merchant captains found themselves operating in an environment where destruction could arrive without warning from the depths below, creating a climate of fear and uncertainty that would only intensify as American submarine operations expanded. The morning of January 22, 1944, marked the beginning of the Tang's legendary career as she departed Pearl Harbor for her first war patrol. The submarine's destination lay in the Caroline Islands, Mariana Islands area, a region that represented one of the most heavily trafficked Japanese shipping routes in the Central Pacific. Commander O'Kane and his crew understood that they were entering waters where Japanese naval presence remained strong, but the potential rewards justified the considerable risks involved in penetrating deep into enemy-controlled territory. The Caroline Islands had served as a crucial staging area for Japanese military operations since the early days of the Pacific War. These strategically positioned islands provided bases for aircraft, naval vessels, and supply operations that supported Japanese forces throughout the Central Pacific region. The shipping routes connecting these bases to the Japanese home islands carried a constant stream of merchant vessels loaded with military supplies, raw materials, and personnel essential to maintaining Japan's extended military commitments. For 26 days, the Tang patrolled these dangerous waters, her crew maintaining constant vigilance while searching for enemy shipping. The submarine operated primarily at periscope depth during daylight hours, with crew members taking turns at the periscope to scan the horizon for telltale signs of enemy vessels. The monotony of patrol duty was punctuated by periods of intense excitement when potential targets appeared on the horizon, requiring split-second decisions about attack approaches and tactical positioning. On February 17, 1944, the Tang's patience was finally rewarded when lookouts spotted a convoy consisting of 2 large freighters accompanied by 5 smaller vessels and their naval escort. This represented exactly the type of target that American submarine commanders sought, a concentration of valuable merchant shipping that could significantly impact Japanese supply capabilities with a single successful attack. Commander O'Kane immediately began the complex process of maneuvering his submarine into an optimal attack position. The approach phase of a submarine attack required extraordinary skill and patience. The Tang had to carefully plot the convoy's course and speed while remaining undetected by enemy lookouts and escort vessels. This tactical dance could last for hours, with the submarine making subtle course corrections to arrive at the ideal firing position while avoiding detection by increasingly alert enemy forces. The mathematics involved in calculating torpedo firing solutions under these conditions required split-second precision and years of training. As the Tang moved into position for her first attack, an enemy escort suddenly appeared at a range of 7,000 yards and began closing rapidly on the submarine's position. This development forced Commander O'Kane to order his vessel deep, taking the Tang below periscope depth to avoid detection and potential ramming by the approaching escort vessel. The crew remained silent as 5 depth charges exploded around their submarine, creating tremendous underwater concussions that tested both the vessel's structural integrity and the crew's nerve. The depth charge attack represented one of the most terrifying experiences in submarine warfare. The explosive charges, dropped from surface vessels and timed to detonate at specific depths, created massive underwater shockwaves capable of rupturing submarine hulls or damaging critical internal systems. Submarine crews had to endure these attacks in complete silence, knowing that any sound might reveal their position to enemy forces equipped with increasingly sophisticated sound detection equipment. Following the depth charge attack, the Tang returned to periscope depth and resumed her pursuit of the enemy convoy. This demonstrated the resilience and determination that characterized American submarine operations throughout the Pacific War. Despite the immediate danger posed by enemy escort vessels, experienced submarine commanders like O'Kane understood that successful attacks often required accepting calculated risks to achieve tactically significant results. The Tang's first successful torpedo attack came when Commander O'Kane positioned his submarine at a range of 1,500 yards from the nearest enemy freighter. At this relatively close range, the probability of torpedo hits increased dramatically, while the enemy vessel's ability to take evasive action became severely limited. The submarine fired a spread of 4 torpedoes, a standard tactical procedure designed to ensure hits even if individual torpedoes malfunctioned or missed their intended targets. Three of the four torpedoes found their mark, striking the 6,800-ton freighter Gyoten Maru with devastating effect. The enemy vessel sank rapidly by the stern, disappearing beneath the Pacific waves in a matter of minutes. This initial success demonstrated the destructive potential of American submarine operations when properly executed, while providing valuable combat experience for the Tang's crew members who were participating in their first actual engagement with enemy forces. The psychological impact of witnessing their first successful sinking affected the Tang's crew in various ways. Some crew members experienced intense satisfaction at striking a blow against the enemy, while others found themselves sobered by the realization that their actions had likely resulted in the loss of human life. Submarine warfare, unlike other forms of military combat, often involved attacking merchant vessels crewed by civilian personnel, creating moral complexities that submarine crews had to reconcile with their military duties. Following the successful attack on Gyoten Maru, the Tang attempted to pursue the remaining freighter in the convoy for a follow-up attack. However, the enemy vessel had increased speed and altered course to escape the submarine's attack zone, while Japanese aircraft appeared overhead to provide additional protection for the surviving merchant ship. This development forced Commander O'Kane to abandon the pursuit and seek alternative targets in the surrounding waters. The appearance of Japanese aircraft over the attack area reflected the increasing sophistication of enemy anti-submarine measures in the Central Pacific region. By 1944, Japanese naval forces had begun to understand the magnitude of the submarine threat to their shipping operations and were implementing improved protection measures for their merchant convoys. These measures included increased air patrols, more numerous escort vessels, and better coordination between surface and air forces. On the night of February 22nd, the Tang encountered another enemy convoy, this time consisting of 3 cargo ships protected by 2 escort vessels. The darkness provided excellent cover for a surface attack, allowing the submarine to use her superior speed and maneuverability while remaining relatively invisible to enemy lookouts. Night surface attacks had become a standard tactical procedure for American submarines, combining the element of surprise with enhanced torpedo accuracy. The Tang tracked this convoy for 30 minutes through rain squalls that made radar detection extremely difficult for both the submarine and her targets. Weather conditions in the Pacific often played a crucial role in submarine operations, with rain, fog, and storms providing concealment opportunities while simultaneously complicating navigation and target acquisition procedures. Experienced submarine commanders learned to exploit weather conditions as tactical advantages whenever possible. Commander O'Kane positioned the Tang on the surface at a range of 1,500 yards off the port bow of one of the enemy freighters before launching his second torpedo attack of the patrol. The 4 torpedoes fired at Fukuyama Maru achieved devastating results, striking the 3,600-ton vessel from bow to stern and causing it to literally disintegrate under the impact of multiple explosions. The complete destruction of this enemy vessel provided dramatic evidence of the destructive power of concentrated torpedo attacks. The following morning brought another opportunity for the Tang to demonstrate her combat effectiveness. The submarine approached the convoy's lead ship, the 6,800-ton Yamashimo Maru, after carefully observing the movements of the vessel's escort. When the escort moved away from its protective position, Commander O'Kane seized the opportunity to move the Tang into optimal firing position for another torpedo spread. The attack on Yamashimo Maru produced some of the most spectacular results of the Tang's first patrol. The first torpedo struck the merchantman's stern, while the second hit just aft of the ship's smokestack. The third torpedo struck forward of the bridge and produced a tremendous secondary explosion that indicated the vessel had been carrying ammunition or other explosive materials. Contemporary accounts described the enemy ship as being twisted, lifted from the water before beginning to spout flames as it sank beneath the surface. These secondary explosions, often resulting from hits on vessels carrying ammunition, fuel, or other explosive materials, created some of the most memorable moments in submarine warfare. The spectacular nature of such explosions provided visual confirmation of successful attacks, while also serving as psychological warfare against enemy personnel who witnessed the devastating results of submarine torpedo attacks. The Tang's first war patrol concluded with impressive statistics that established the submarine's reputation as one of the most effective vessels in the Pacific Fleet. During this initial combat deployment, the Tang sank 6 Japanese ships totaling 18,000 tons of enemy shipping, while achieving a remarkable torpedo hit rate of 16 successful impacts out of 24 torpedoes fired. This 67% success rate far exceeded the average performance of American submarines during the early war period. The success of the Tang's first patrol reflected several important developments in American submarine warfare capabilities. Improved torpedo reliability had largely eliminated the mechanical problems that had plagued American submarine operations during 1941 and 1942, when faulty Mark 14 torpedoes had frequently failed to explode even when achieving direct hits on enemy vessels. By 1944, these technical problems had been resolved through extensive testing and engineering improvements. Enhanced crew training also contributed significantly to the Tang's exceptional performance during her first combat patrol. The months of intensive preparation that preceded the submarine's deployment had created a highly efficient crew capable of executing complex tactical maneuvers under combat conditions. This training emphasis would continue throughout the war, as the United States Navy recognized the critical importance of crew proficiency in submarine operations. Intelligence support for submarine operations had also improved dramatically by 1944, providing commanders like O'Kane with detailed information about enemy shipping schedules, convoy routes, and naval dispositions. This intelligence advantage allowed American submarines to position themselves with remarkable precision along heavily used enemy shipping lanes, maximizing opportunities for successful attacks while minimizing exposure to enemy anti-submarine measures. The Tang's return to Pearl Harbor following her first war patrol marked the beginning of her legendary status within the American submarine force. The submarine's exceptional performance during this initial deployment established Commander O'Kane's reputation as one of the most capable submarine commanders in the Pacific theater, while demonstrating the devastating potential of American submarine operations against Japanese shipping throughout the Central Pacific region. The success of the Tang's first war patrol created ripple effects throughout the American submarine community in the Pacific, establishing new benchmarks for effectiveness and tactical innovation. As the submarine returned to Pearl Harbor in March 1944, naval intelligence analysts began studying her methods and results to identify best practices that could be disseminated to other submarine crews operating throughout the vast Pacific theater. The Tang's achievements represented more than individual success. They demonstrated the maturation of American submarine warfare as a strategic weapon capable of fundamentally altering the course of the Pacific War. Commander O'Kane's tactical approach during the Tang's first patrol revealed several innovative elements that distinguished his methods from conventional submarine warfare practices. Rather than relying solely on long-range torpedo attacks from maximum concealment, O'Kane demonstrated a willingness to close to relatively short ranges where torpedo accuracy increased dramatically while enemy vessels had minimal time to take evasive action. This aggressive approach required exceptional skill in submarine handling and precise timing, but the results spoke for themselves. The psychological impact of the Tang's early successes extended beyond the immediate tactical results to influence Japanese merchant marine operations throughout the Central Pacific region. Reports of sudden, devastating submarine attacks began circulating among Japanese shipping personnel, creating an atmosphere of apprehension and uncertainty that affected crew morale and operational efficiency. Merchant captains found themselves constantly scanning the horizon for periscope wakes or other signs of lurking submarines, while crew members remained on edge during voyages through areas where American submarines had previously struck. Japanese naval intelligence services struggled to comprehend the full scope of American submarine capabilities during this period, partly because survivors of submarine attacks often provided incomplete or contradictory information about their encounters. The sudden nature of submarine attacks, combined with the chaos and confusion that typically accompanied torpedo hits, made it difficult for Japanese analysts to develop accurate assessments of American submarine numbers, capabilities, and tactical methods. The Tang's second war patrol, beginning in April 1944, took the submarine into waters around Palau, the Philippines, and the heavily fortified Japanese naval base at Truk. This patrol area represented some of the most dangerous waters in the Pacific for American submarines, as Japanese naval and air forces maintained strong defensive positions throughout the region. The strategic importance of these bases meant that enemy anti-submarine measures would be particularly intense and sophisticated. During this second patrol, the Tang encountered fewer opportunities for attacking enemy merchant shipping, but demonstrated the versatility of American submarine operations by conducting a dramatic rescue mission that saved 22 United States Navy airmen who had been shot down during carrier attacks on Truk. This rescue operation showcased the multiple roles that submarines played in Pacific operations, serving not only as commerce raiders, but also as rescue vessels, reconnaissance platforms, and special operations support units. The rescue of downed airmen represented one of the most challenging and dangerous missions that submarine crews could undertake. Operating in enemy-controlled waters while surfaced made submarines extremely vulnerable to air attack, while the time required to locate and recover personnel from the water increased exposure to enemy forces. Despite these risks, American submarine commanders regularly volunteered for rescue missions, recognizing the morale value of demonstrating that the Navy would make extraordinary efforts to recover personnel in distress. The technical aspects of submarine rescue operations required careful coordination between submarine crews and rescue personnel. Submarines had to maintain radio contact with rescue coordination centers while operating in waters where radio transmissions might be intercepted by enemy forces. Navigation to precise rescue coordinates often required surfacing in daylight hours when submarines were most vulnerable to air attack, demanding exceptional courage from commanders and crews alike. The Tang's third war patrol, conducted in the Yellow and East China Seas during the summer of 1944, marked a dramatic escalation in the submarine's combat effectiveness. Operating in these confined waters, which represented some of Japan's most critical shipping routes, the Tang encountered target-rich environments where multiple enemy vessels could be attacked during single patrol missions. The results of this patrol would establish the Tang as the most successful American submarine of World War II. The Yellow Sea and East China Sea served as crucial transportation corridors connecting Japanese industrial centers with raw materials and military supplies from conquered territories in China and Southeast Asia. These relatively shallow waters presented unique challenges for submarine operations, as the reduced depth limited diving options while increasing the effectiveness of enemy anti-submarine measures. However, the concentration of enemy shipping in these confined areas also created unprecedented opportunities for devastating attacks. On this third patrol, the Tang achieved some of the most spectacular results in submarine warfare history, sinking 10 enemy vessels, including several ships that were struck by torpedoes initially aimed at other targets. The The close proximity of enemy vessels in convoy formations sometimes resulted in single torpedo spreads, achieving multiple hits on different ships, creating dramatic scenes of destruction that exceeded even the most optimistic expectations of American submarine commanders. One of the most remarkable engagements of this patrol occurred when the Tang encountered a tightly packed enemy convoy and managed to sink 4 ships during a single attack sequence. The tactical execution of this engagement required split-second timing and extraordinary seamanship, as Commander O'Kane maneuvered his submarine through the convoy formation while avoiding collision with enemy vessels and friendly torpedoes. The complexity of this multi-ship engagement demonstrated the evolution of American submarine tactics to a level of sophistication that Japanese forces could not match. The total tonnage destroyed during the Tang's third patrol reached 16,292 tons of enemy shipping, representing a significant blow to Japanese logistical capabilities in the China theater. Each merchant vessel destroyed meant critical supplies that would never reach their intended destinations, whether raw materials needed for Japanese industrial production or military equipment destined for Japanese forces fighting in China and Southeast Asia. The cumulative impact of successful American submarine operations like those conducted by the Tang was beginning to create severe shortages throughout the Japanese war economy by the summer of 1944. Japanese industrial planners found themselves facing critical shortages of raw materials, particularly petroleum products and strategic metals, that could only be transported to the home islands by merchant vessels increasingly vulnerable to submarine attack. Statistical analysis of American submarine operations during this period reveals the devastating effectiveness of the underwater campaign against Japanese shipping. By mid-1944, American submarines were sinking enemy merchant vessels faster than Japanese shipyards could replace them, creating a downward spiral in Japanese logistical capabilities that would ultimately prove unsustainable. The Tang's contributions to this campaign represented some of the most efficient and destructive submarine operations of the entire war. The Tang's fourth war patrol took the submarine directly off the Japanese main island of Honshu, representing the ultimate demonstration of American submarine capabilities by operating in enemy home waters. This patrol area contained some of the most heavily defended shipping routes in the Pacific, with Japanese naval and air forces maintaining constant patrols to protect vital supply lines connecting the home islands with overseas territories. Operating off Honshu required exceptional caution and skill, as the Tang encountered not only enemy merchant shipping but also naval vessels, patrol craft, and aircraft operating from nearby bases. The submarine had to remain constantly alert for enemy forces while simultaneously seeking opportunities to attack merchant convoys moving along the Japanese coast. The psychological pressure on submarine crews operating so close to major enemy population centers added another dimension to the already stressful nature of submarine warfare. During this fourth patrol, the Tang sank 7 enemy ships, including 1 vessel destroyed using the submarine's deck gun rather than torpedoes. Surface gun actions represented a different aspect of submarine warfare, typically conducted against smaller enemy vessels that did not warrant the expenditure of expensive torpedoes. These engagements required submarines to remain surfaced while engaging enemy targets, increasing vulnerability to air attack or the sudden appearance of enemy naval forces. The use of deck guns in submarine operations reflected both the confidence of American submarine crews and the increasing weakness of Japanese anti-submarine defenses in certain areas. By 1944, American submarines operating in some regions could surface and conduct gun actions without immediate fear of enemy retaliation, demonstrating the extent to which American naval forces had gained control over large areas of the Pacific Ocean. The Tang's remarkable success during her first 4 war patrols had established the submarine as the most feared American vessel operating in Pacific waters from the Japanese perspective. Intelligence reports reaching Japanese naval headquarters described a submarine of exceptional capability that seemed to appear wherever valuable shipping concentrated, striking with devastating effectiveness before disappearing back into the vast Pacific expanses. Japanese attempts to counter the Tang's operations reflected the growing desperation of enemy naval planners faced with mounting shipping losses throughout the Pacific theater. Enhanced convoy procedures, increased escort vessel numbers, and improved air patrol patterns all represented Japanese responses to the submarine threat, but these measures proved inadequate against the superior tactics and technology employed by American submarine crews. The cumulative results of the Tang's first 4 war patrols totaled 27 enemy ships sunk, representing approximately 100,000 tons of Japanese shipping destroyed by a single submarine crew. These statistics, remarkable in their own right, represented only a fraction of the total damage being inflicted on Japanese maritime capabilities by American submarines operating throughout the Pacific region during 1944. The strategic implications of the Tang's success extended far beyond the immediate tactical results to influence American naval planning for the final phase of the Pacific War. The demonstrated effectiveness of submarine operations against Japanese shipping provided naval commanders with confidence that the economic strangulation of Japan could be achieved through sustained submarine campaigns, potentially reducing the need for costly amphibious operations against heavily defended Japanese positions. As the Tang prepared for her 5th and final war patrol in October 1944, the submarine had already established herself as the most successful American submarine of World War II. However, the most dramatic and tragic chapter of the Tang's career lay ahead, as Commander O'Kane prepared to lead his crew into waters where their greatest enemy would prove to be their own weapon turned against them. October 1944 found the Tang preparing for what would become her most legendary and tragic war patrol, as Commander O'Kane received orders to operate in the Formosa Strait and adjacent waters off the Chinese coast. This patrol area represented some of the most strategically important shipping lanes in the Western Pacific, where Japanese convoys carrying critical supplies between the home islands and occupied territories in Southeast Asia faced increasingly dangerous passage through waters now dominated by American submarine forces. The strategic situation in the Pacific had shifted dramatically by October 1944, with American forces having secured air and naval superiority over vast areas of ocean that had previously been under Japanese control. The recent victories in the Marianas Campaign had provided American forces with advanced bases from which submarines, aircraft and surface vessels could strike deep into Japanese-controlled territory, creating unprecedented opportunities for interdicting enemy supply lines. Japanese naval planners during this period found themselves facing an impossible strategic dilemma regarding the protection of merchant shipping. The extended nature of Japanese supply lines, stretching across thousands of miles of ocean, made comprehensive convoy protection extremely difficult given the limited number of escort vessels available to the Imperial Japanese Navy. The competing demands of fleet operations, coastal defense, and convoy escort duties forced Japanese commanders to make painful decisions about resource allocation that often left merchant vessels vulnerable to submarine attack. The Tang's 5th patrol began on October 1, 1944, as the submarine departed from Midway Atoll bound for the Formosa Strait area. The crew's morale remained exceptionally high following their previous successes, with many crew members expressing confidence that this patrol would add to their already impressive record of enemy ships destroyed. The submarine's reputation throughout the Pacific Fleet had grown to legendary proportions, with other submarine crews studying the Tang's methods and attempting to emulate Commander O'Kane's aggressive tactical approach. The journey to the patrol area required the Tang to traverse approximately 3,000 miles of Pacific Ocean, much of it through waters where Japanese naval and air forces maintained varying degrees of presence. Submarine commanders had to balance the need for speed in reaching their assigned patrol areas with the requirement to remain undetected during transit through potentially hostile waters. This balance required careful route planning and constant vigilance from crews who understood that detection during transit could compromise entire patrol missions. Navigation during long-distance submarine transits demanded exceptional skill from submarine navigators who had to maintain accurate position information using celestial observations obtained through periscope sightings or brief surface appearances during favorable conditions. The accuracy of navigation became particularly critical when submarines approached their assigned patrol areas, where precise positioning could mean the difference between successful interdiction of enemy shipping and fruitless searches in empty ocean. Upon reaching the Formosa Strait area in mid-October, the Tang immediately encountered evidence of heavy Japanese shipping activity. Smoke trails on the horizon, radio intercepts and intelligence reports indicated that major enemy convoys were operating in the area, presenting the submarine with multiple potential targets. Commander O'Kane began the careful process of positioning his vessel to intercept these convoys while remaining undetected by increasingly alert Japanese escort forces. The Formosa Strait served as a critical choke point for Japanese shipping moving between the home islands and the resource-rich territories of Southeast Asia. The narrow confines of the strait concentrated enemy shipping into predictable routes that American submarines could patrol with exceptional effectiveness. However, these same geographic constraints also allowed Japanese forces to concentrate their anti-submarine measures in relatively small areas, creating dangerous environments for attacking submarines. Intelligence reports available to Commander O'Kane indicated that Japanese convoy schedules had become increasingly irregular as enemy naval planners attempted to avoid predictable patterns that might be exploited by American submarine forces. This tactical adaptation forced American submarine commanders to rely more heavily on patrol methods rather than precision intercepts based on specific intelligence about convoy movements. On October 10th, the Tang encountered her first major convoy of the patrol, consisting of several large merchant vessels accompanied by naval escorts. The size and composition of this convoy suggested that it carried particularly valuable cargo, making it a high-priority target despite the risks associated with attacking heavily escorted formations. Commander O'Kane began the complex process of analyzing the convoy's formation, speed, and escort patterns to develop an optimal attack plan. The tactical challenge of attacking heavily escorted convoys required submarine commanders to balance multiple competing factors, including escort vessel positions, merchant ship formations, weather conditions, sea state, and time of day. Successful attacks often depended on identifying brief windows of opportunity when escort coverage might be temporarily weakened or when convoy formations created favorable approach angles for torpedo attacks. The Tang's attack on this convoy demonstrated the peak of American submarine tactical development, as Commander O'Kane maneuvered his vessel through the escort screen to achieve close-range torpedo firing positions against multiple target vessels. The submarine fired a carefully planned spread of torpedoes that resulted in hits on two large merchant vessels, both of which sank rapidly following the devastating impacts of American Mark 13 torpedoes. The destruction of these two enemy vessels created immediate chaos within the convoy formation as surviving ships took evasive action while escort vessels rushed to the attack area to search for the submarine responsible for the devastation. The Tang's crew maintained strict silence as enemy depth charges exploded around their vessel, testing both the submarine's structural integrity and the crew's psychological resilience under extreme combat stress. Escape from the immediate attack area required exceptional submarine handling skills, as Commander O'Kane maneuvered the Tang through waters now saturated with enemy vessels searching for signs of the attacking submarine. The successful completion of this phase of the attack demonstrated the maturity of American submarine tactics and the superior training of submarine crews who could execute complex maneuvers under intense enemy pressure. Statistical analysis of this engagement revealed the devastating effectiveness that individual submarines could achieve against Japanese shipping when operated by skilled crews under favorable conditions. The 2 merchant vessels destroyed during this attack represented several thousand tons of shipping lost to the Japanese war effort, along with whatever critical supplies these vessels had been carrying toward their intended destinations. On October 23rd, the Tang encountered what would prove to be the most significant convoy of her final patrol, a formation of large tankers and cargo vessels that represented one of the most valuable targets any American submarine had encountered during the Pacific War. The composition of this convoy, including several large petroleum tankers, suggested that it carried fuel supplies critical to Japanese military operations throughout the Western Pacific region. The petroleum carried by Japanese tanker convoys represented one of the most critical vulnerabilities in the enemy war effort, as Japan's domestic oil production remained insufficient to support military operations throughout their extended empire. The loss of tanker vessels not only eliminated current fuel supplies, but also reduced Japan's ability to transport petroleum products from conquered territories in Southeast Asia to industrial centers in the home islands. Commander O'Kane's analysis of this massive convoy revealed both exceptional opportunities and unprecedented dangers, as the formation included not only valuable target vessels, but also numerous escort ships equipped with increasingly sophisticated anti-submarine detection equipment. The size of the escort force reflected Japanese recognition of the convoy's strategic importance and their determination to ensure its safe passage through waters known to be infested with American submarines. The tactical approach to this convoy required the Tang to demonstrate the full range of submarine warfare capabilities developed by American forces during 3 years of Pacific combat operations. The submarine would need to penetrate the escort screen, select optimal target vessels from among the many available, execute precisely timed torpedo attacks, and then escape from an area that would quickly become saturated with enemy vessels seeking revenge for the destruction of their valuable convoy. The night of October 23, 24 would witness the most intensive combat action of the Tang's career, as Commander O'Kane prepared to lead his crew into an engagement that would establish the submarine's place in naval history while simultaneously sealing the fate of the vessel and most of her crew. The combination of opportunity and danger present in this situation epitomized the nature of submarine warfare in the Pacific, where individual actions could achieve strategic results while exposing participants to mortal peril. Weather conditions on the night of the attack favored submarine operations, with moderate seas and limited visibility that would allow the Tang to approach the enemy convoy while remaining relatively concealed from Japanese lookouts. The darkness provided natural camouflage for the submarine's approach, while the sea state would not interfere significantly with torpedo accuracy or submarine maneuverability during the critical phases of the attack. As the Tang moved into position for what would become her final combat engagement, the submarine's crew prepared their weapons and equipment with the professional competence that had characterized all of their previous operations. Torpedo crews loaded weapons into the firing tubes, while sonar operators maintained continuous monitoring of the tactical situation developing around their vessel. The atmosphere aboard the submarine combined anticipation of another successful engagement with the constant awareness of danger that accompanied all submarine combat operations. The events that would unfold during the next few hours would demonstrate both the spectacular potential and the inherent dangers of submarine warfare in the Pacific theater. The Tang's final engagement would achieve results that exceeded even the most optimistic expectations, while simultaneously revealing the tragic irony that could characterize submarine operations when technical failures transformed weapons intended for the enemy into instruments of destruction against the submarines that fired them. The night of October 24th, 1944, began with perfect conditions for submarine warfare as the Tang positioned herself for attack against the massive Japanese convoy that had been tracked throughout the previous day. Commander O'Kane had spent hours analyzing the enemy formation, identifying the most valuable targets while calculating approach routes that would maximize the submarine's chances of achieving multiple hits while minimizing exposure to the convoy's substantial escort force. The convoy that lay before the Tang represented one of the most lucrative targets any American submarine had encountered during the Pacific War. Intelligence analysis had identified the formation as containing multiple large tankers carrying petroleum products essential to Japanese military operations, along with cargo vessels loaded with strategic materials bound for Japanese industrial centers. The destruction of this convoy would strike a significant blow against Japanese logistical capabilities, while adding substantially to the Tang's already impressive record of enemy shipping destroyed. Japanese convoy protection measures had evolved considerably since the early war period, reflecting painful lessons learned through the loss of hundreds of merchant vessels to American submarine attacks. The escort force accompanying this particular convoy included multiple destroyers equipped with the latest anti-submarine detection equipment, along with smaller escort vessels positioned to provide overlapping coverage against submarine attack. However, these defensive measures had not kept pace with the evolving sophistication of American submarine tactics. The Tang's approach to the convoy began in the early evening hours as Commander O'Kane maneuvered his submarine into optimal position for a surface attack under cover of darkness. Surface attacks had become standard procedure for American submarines operating against Japanese convoys, as they combined superior speed and maneuverability with enhanced torpedo accuracy while maintaining the element of surprise that characterized successful submarine operations. At approximately 2 a.m. on October 24th, the Tang had achieved perfect positioning relative to the enemy convoy, with 3 high-value targets selected for immediate attack. Commander O'Kane's tactical plan called for firing 2 torpedoes at each of the 3 selected vessels, a spread pattern designed to ensure hits even if individual torpedoes malfunctioned or enemy vessels took successful evasive action during the brief interval between torpedo firing and impact. The first phase of the attack proceeded with devastating effectiveness, as 6 torpedoes launched from the Tang found their intended targets with lethal precision. 2 large enemy vessels began sinking immediately following torpedo impacts, while a third ship suffered severe damage that would ultimately prove fatal. The spectacular nature of these hits, including secondary explosions that illuminated the night sky, created scenes of destruction that exceeded even Commander O'Kane's optimistic expectations for the engagement. The psychological impact of this sudden, devastating attack on the Japanese convoy personnel cannot be overstated. Sailors aboard the targeted vessels found themselves facing instant destruction from weapons they could neither see nor effectively counter, while personnel on surrounding ships watched in horror as their companions died in explosions that erupted without warning from the darkness surrounding the convoy. A 4th enemy vessel, identified as a destroyer that had moved to attack the Tang's position, suddenly exploded during the engagement under circumstances that remained unclear to American personnel at the time. Post-engagement analysis suggested that this enemy warship had fallen victim either to one of the Tang's torpedoes or to friendly fire from other Japanese vessels in the confusion following the submarine's initial attack on the convoy. The destruction of an enemy destroyer during this engagement represented a significant tactical victory for the Tang, as Japanese naval vessels posed far greater threats to submarine operations than merchant ships. The loss of escort vessels weakened the defensive capabilities of Japanese convoys, while simultaneously reducing the Imperial Japanese Navy's already strained capacity to provide adequate protection for merchant shipping throughout the Western Pacific. Following the initial phase of the attack, Commander O'Kane assessed the tactical situation and determined that the Tang retained sufficient torpedoes to complete the destruction of the enemy convoy. 2 torpedoes remained available for use, and one enemy vessel that had been damaged during the initial attack appeared to be attempting to escape from the engagement area. The opportunity to achieve complete destruction of this valuable enemy convoy proved too tempting for the aggressive submarine commander to ignore. The decision to continue the attack rather than withdrawing from the area after achieving substantial success reflected both Commander O'Kane's confidence in his submarine's capabilities and his understanding of the strategic importance of maximizing damage against enemy shipping whenever opportunities presented themselves. American submarine commanders throughout the Pacific had learned that complete destruction of enemy convoys often prevented survivor vessels from reporting submarine positions to enemy anti-submarine forces. The decision to fire the Tang's remaining torpedoes at the surviving enemy vessel would prove to be the most fateful choice in the submarine's illustrious career. At approximately 2:30 a.m. on October 24, 1944, Commander O'Kane ordered the firing of the 23rd torpedo of the patrol, aimed at a large enemy transport that appeared to be attempting to escape from the convoy's destruction. This torpedo functioned perfectly, striking the enemy vessel and adding another significant sinking to the Tang's remarkable record. Confident in his submarine's performance and recognizing an opportunity to completely annihilate the enemy convoy, Commander O'Kane made the decision to fire his final torpedo at another surviving enemy vessel. The 24th torpedo of the patrol launched from the Tang's forward tubes at approximately 2:35 a.m., initially appearing to track normally toward its intended target. However, within moments of firing, the torpedo's behavior became erratic as it began to curve in a wide arc that would ultimately seal the fate of the submarine that had launched it. The circular run of the Tang's final torpedo represented one of the most tragic technical failures in naval warfare history. Despite the improvements made to American torpedo technology since the early war period, mechanical malfunctions could still occur under combat conditions, transforming weapons intended for enemy destruction into instruments of self-destruction. The torpedo's guidance system had apparently malfunctioned, causing the weapon to turn in a complete circle and head directly back toward the submarine that had fired it. Commander O'Kane immediately recognized the mortal danger facing his submarine as the torpedo's wake became visible in the darkness, clearly indicating that the weapon was returning toward the Tang's position. The submarine commander ordered emergency maneuvers to avoid the approaching torpedo, but the Tang's size and momentum made rapid course changes impossible. Despite desperate efforts to move the submarine clear of the torpedo's path, the weapon struck the Tang's port side with devastating effect. The explosion that followed the torpedo impact instantly killed most of the Tang's crew members who were below decks at the time of the collision. The force of the blast, occurring at close range against the submarine's hull, created massive structural damage that caused the Tang to sink rapidly in approximately 180 feet of water. Of the 87 officers and men aboard the submarine at the time of the disaster, only 9 would survive to see the end of World War II. Commander O'Kane and several other crew members who had been on the submarine's bridge at the time of the explosion found themselves thrown into the water as the Tang began her final dive. The surface survivors faced immediate challenges, including rough seas, darkness, and the approaching enemy vessels that had been targets of their attack only minutes earlier. Japanese rescue vessels picked up these survivors, beginning their long ordeal as prisoners of war. Below the surface, 29 crew members had survived the initial explosion and torpedo impact, finding themselves trapped in the Tang's forward sections as seawater flooded the submarine's compartments. These men faced the terrifying prospect of escape from a sunken submarine lying in 180 feet of water, a depth that challenged the limits of existing escape equipment and procedures. The survivors would need to use Momsen lungs, primitive breathing apparatus designed for submarine escape operations. The escape attempt from the sunken Tang would mark the first and only successful use of Momsen lungs during World War II submarine operations. These breathing devices, consisting of simple oxygen rebreathers and inflatable life vests, allowed submarine personnel to ascend from moderate depths while providing limited breathing capability during the ascent process. However, the depth at which the Tang lay represented near the maximum effective range for these escape devices. 13 crew members attempted escape from the sunken submarine using Momsen lungs, but only 8 successfully reached the surface alive. The physical and psychological challenges of ascending from 180 feet underwater, combined with the effects of nitrogen narcosis and decompression, proved fatal to several men during their desperate attempts to reach safety. Those who did reach the surface faced the additional challenge of survival in open water until rescue arrived. The Japanese rescue of Tang survivors represented an unusual situation in Pacific warfare, where enemy personnel found themselves rescuing American submariners who had just finished destroying multiple Japanese vessels in their convoy. Despite the destruction the Tang had inflicted on their shipping, Japanese rescue personnel treated the American survivors according to international maritime law, pulling them from the water and providing immediate medical attention. The strategic impact of the Tang's final patrol extended far beyond the tragic loss of the submarine and most of her crew. During her fifth and final patrol, the Tang had sunk 13 enemy vessels, bringing her total wartime sinkings to 33 Japanese ships, representing more than 116,000 tons of enemy shipping destroyed. This remarkable record established the Tang as the most successful American submarine of World War II in terms of enemy vessels sunk. Commander Richard O'Kane's leadership during the Tang's final engagements earned him the Medal of Honor, the nation's highest decoration for military valor. Despite spending the remainder of the war as a prisoner of war in Japanese camps, O'Kane's tactical innovations and aggressive approach to submarine warfare had demonstrated the devastating potential of American submarine operations against Japanese shipping throughout the Pacific theater. The loss of the Tang represented more than the destruction of a single submarine. It marked the end of one of the most successful submarine crews in naval history. The combination of experienced leadership, superior technology, and aggressive tactics had created a team capable of achieving unprecedented results against enemy shipping, establishing standards for submarine warfare that would influence American naval operations for decades to come. The destruction of the USS Tang in October 1944, while tragic for her crew and their families, represented only one dramatic episode in a much larger campaign that was systematically strangling Japanese maritime capabilities throughout the Pacific theater. The statistical analysis of American submarine operations during World War II reveals the staggering effectiveness of the underwater campaign against Japanese shipping, with submarines accounting for approximately 60% of all Japanese merchant vessel losses during the conflict. By the time of the Tang's loss, American submarines had already sunk more than 1,000 Japanese merchant vessels, representing millions of tons of shipping that could no longer transport the raw materials and military supplies essential to Japan's war effort. This maritime interdiction campaign had reached such effectiveness that Japanese industrial planners were facing critical shortages of petroleum, strategic metals, and other essential materials that could only be obtained from conquered territories in Southeast Asia. The strategic significance of submarine warfare against Japanese shipping becomes clear when examining Japan's fundamental vulnerability to maritime interdiction. As an island nation with limited domestic natural resources, Japan depended almost entirely on imported raw materials to sustain both civilian population needs and military operations throughout their extended empire. The systematic destruction of Japanese merchant shipping by American submarines effectively severed these critical supply lines. Japanese petroleum imports represented perhaps the most critical vulnerability exploited by American submarine operations. Japan's domestic oil production provided less than 10% of the nation's petroleum requirements, making the transportation of crude oil and refined products from conquered territories in Southeast Asia absolutely essential for continued military operations. American submarines specifically targeted Japanese tanker traffic, achieving devastating results against this most critical category of enemy shipping. The mathematical progression of Japanese shipping losses reveals the accelerating effectiveness of American submarine operations as the war progressed. During 1942, American submarines sank approximately 180 Japanese merchant vessels, but by 1944, this figure had increased to over 600 ships destroyed in a single year. The Tang's contributions to this total, while spectacular in their own right, represented part of a coordinated campaign involving hundreds of American submarines operating throughout the Pacific region. Intelligence support for submarine operations had evolved into a sophisticated system that provided submarine commanders with unprecedented information about enemy shipping movements and naval dispositions. The successful decryption of Japanese naval communications, combined with aerial reconnaissance and Coast Watcher reports, allowed American submarines to position themselves with remarkable precision along enemy shipping routes. The technological evolution of American submarines during the war years directly contributed to the increasing effectiveness of operations like those conducted by the Tang. Improvements in torpedo reliability, sonar systems, radar equipment, and submarine construction had eliminated many of the mechanical problems that had plagued early war operations, while enhanced crew training programs ensured that submarine personnel could exploit these technological advantages effectively. Japanese responses to the growing submarine threat reflected increasing desperation as enemy naval planners struggled to protect shipping with inadequate resources. The Imperial Japanese Navy had never developed comprehensive convoy protection capabilities comparable to those employed in the Atlantic Theater, leaving Japanese merchant vessels largely dependent on individual ship routing and limited escort availability. The psychological impact of sustained submarine attacks on Japanese merchant marine personnel had reached critical proportions by late 1944. With many experienced mariners refusing assignments on vessels operating through waters known to be infested with American submarines. This personnel shortage further complicated Japanese attempts to maintain adequate shipping services between the home islands and overseas territories. Economic analysis of the submarine campaign's impact reveals the cascading effects of maritime interdiction on Japanese war production. The loss of critical raw materials forced Japanese industries to reduce production schedules while seeking alternative supply sources that often proved inadequate or prohibitively expensive. Steel production, aircraft manufacturing, and petroleum refining all suffered significant reductions as submarine attacks disrupted supply chains. The geographic scope of American submarine operations had expanded throughout the war to encompass virtually all waters surrounding Japanese-controlled territory. Submarines like the Tang operated not only along major shipping routes but also in coastal waters adjacent to Japanese industrial centers, effectively creating a maritime blockade that challenged Japanese ability to move materials even between domestic ports. Allied submarine operations in the Pacific Theater extended beyond American vessels to include submarines from Australia, Britain, and the Netherlands, creating a coordinated international effort against Japanese shipping. However, American submarines, due to their superior numbers and technological capabilities, accounted for the vast majority of enemy vessels destroyed during the underwater campaign. The training programs that produced submarine crews, like those aboard the Tang, represented a significant investment in specialized personnel development. Submarine warfare required skills and knowledge far beyond those needed for conventional naval operations, demanding months of intensive instruction in everything from torpedo mechanics to emergency escape procedures. The high casualty rates among submarine personnel made this training investment particularly costly. Logistical support for extended submarine operations required sophisticated base facilities and supply chains that could maintain submarines operating thousands of miles from American industrial centers. Pearl Harbor, Midway, and other Pacific bases evolved into complex submarine support facilities capable of performing major repairs, torpedo loading, and crew rest and recreation services essential for sustained submarine operations. The evolution of submarine tactical doctrine during the Pacific War reflected lessons learned from successful operations like those conducted by the Tang. Aggressive surface attacks, close-range torpedo firing, and coordinated patrol patterns became standard procedures that were disseminated throughout the American submarine force via training programs and tactical publications. Japanese naval construction priorities during the latter part of the war shifted increasingly toward anti-submarine vessels and escort craft as enemy planners belatedly recognized the critical importance of protecting merchant shipping. However, these construction programs could not keep pace with the rate of shipping losses being inflicted by American submarine operations throughout the Pacific Theater. The statistical record of submarine effectiveness against Japanese naval vessels, as opposed to merchant shipping, demonstrates that American submarines posed significant threats to enemy warships as well as civilian vessels. Submarines sank numerous Japanese destroyers, cruisers, and even aircraft carriers during the Pacific War, contributing to the overall degradation of Japanese naval capabilities. Medical and psychological support for submarine crews reflected recognition of the unique stresses associated with underwater warfare. The confined conditions, constant danger, and high casualty rates among submarine personnel created mental health challenges that required specialized attention from naval medical authorities. Programs for managing combat stress and crew rotation became essential elements of submarine operations. The technological race between submarine capabilities and anti-submarine measures continued throughout the Pacific War, with both sides introducing new equipment and tactics designed to gain advantages in underwater warfare. American submarines benefited from superior industrial capabilities that allowed rapid incorporation of technological improvements, while Japanese anti-submarine efforts remained limited by resource constraints. Communication procedures for submarine operations required sophisticated radio equipment and coding systems that could maintain contact with base headquarters while preserving operational security. Submarines operating in enemy waters faced constant challenges in maintaining communications without revealing their positions to enemy direction-finding equipment. The rescue and recovery operations that saved Tang survivors represented standard procedures for submarine operations, despite the obvious risks involved in operating in enemy-controlled waters. American submarine commanders regularly volunteered for rescue missions, understanding that crew morale throughout the submarine force depended on confidence that extraordinary efforts would be made to recover personnel in distress. Weather and oceanographic conditions in the Pacific created unique challenges for submarine operations that differed significantly from those encountered in other theaters. The vast distances, tropical storms, and complex current patterns required specialized navigation skills and weather routing capabilities that became essential elements of successful submarine operations. The industrial mobilization required to support American submarine operations involved not only submarine construction, but also torpedo manufacturing, submarine base development, and personnel training facilities that represented massive investments in specialized military capabilities. This industrial commitment reflected American recognition of submarine warfare's strategic importance in the Pacific theater. As the Pacific War entered its final phase in 1945, American submarine operations had achieved such effectiveness that Japanese shipping operations had been reduced to coastal traffic, using small vessels that could avoid the major shipping routes now dominated by American submarines. The strategic objective of maritime interdiction had been largely achieved through the accumulated efforts of submarines like the Tang and the hundreds of other American vessels that participated in the underwater campaign. The 9 survivors of the USS Tang faced an uncertain and perilous future as Japanese rescue vessels pulled them from the frigid waters of the Taiwan Strait in the early morning hours of October 25, 1944. Commander Richard O'Kane, despite his injuries from the explosion that had destroyed his submarine, remained conscious and alert as enemy personnel began the process of interrogating and processing the American prisoners who had just finished destroying 13 ships from their convoy. Japanese treatment of submarine prisoners of war often differed from their handling of other categories of American military personnel, as submarine crews were frequently viewed as particularly dangerous enemies who had caused enormous damage to Japanese shipping operations. The psychological impact of losing multiple vessels to a single enemy submarine created intense animosity among Japanese naval personnel, who sometimes sought immediate revenge against captured submarine crews. The initial interrogation of Tang survivors took place aboard Japanese naval vessels that had participated in the convoy escort duties, creating an atmosphere where the proximity of destruction and loss of comrades intensified emotions on both sides. Japanese officers conducting these interrogations faced the unusual situation of questioning enemy personnel who had demonstrated exceptional skill and determination in destroying Japanese shipping, earning grudging professional respect despite their enemy status. Commander O'Kane's capture represented a significant intelligence coup for Japanese naval forces, as his reputation as one of America's most successful submarine commanders had made him a person of considerable interest to enemy intelligence services. Japanese interrogators understood that O'Kane possessed detailed knowledge of American submarine capabilities, tactics, and operational patterns that could prove invaluable in developing countermeasures against future submarine attacks. The psychological condition of Tang survivors during their initial captivity reflected the trauma of witnessing the destruction of their submarine and the loss of 78 shipmates in a matter of minutes. Survivor accounts describe the profound shock and disbelief that accompanied realization that their own torpedo had destroyed the most successful American submarine of World War II, creating psychological burdens that would persist long after the war's end. Japanese prisoner of war camps during the final year of World War II operated under increasingly difficult conditions as Allied bombing campaigns disrupted supply lines and reduced available resources for prisoner maintenance. American submarine personnel, often viewed as particularly dangerous prisoners, sometimes received harsher treatment than other categories of Allied prisoners, reflecting Japanese frustration with the submarine campaign's effectiveness. The intelligence value of captured submarine personnel extended beyond immediate tactical information to include broader strategic insights about American submarine construction capabilities, training methods, and operational planning. Japanese intelligence officers recognized that experienced submarine crews possessed knowledge that could help enemy forces understand the full scope of American submarine operations throughout the Pacific theater. Medical treatment for Tang survivors during their initial captivity reflected the limited resources available to Japanese forces operating in forward areas, as well as varying attitudes toward prisoner welfare among different Japanese units. Some survivors received adequate medical attention for injuries sustained during the submarine's destruction, while others faced periods of neglect that complicated recovery from their traumatic experiences. The propaganda value of capturing the crew of America's most successful submarine was not lost on Japanese information services, who sought to exploit the Tang's destruction as evidence that American submarine operations could be effectively countered through improved Japanese anti-submarine measures. However, the reality that 13 Japanese ships had been sunk during the same engagement complicated efforts to present the submarine's loss as an unqualified Japanese victory. Communication between Tang prisoners and their families remained impossible throughout their captivity, as Japanese authorities rarely provided prisoner status information to international organizations like the Red Cross. Families of Tang crew members faced months of uncertainty about the fate of their loved ones, with official notification often limited to missing in action designations that provided no information about survival or capture. The daily routine in Japanese prisoner-of-war camps varied considerably depending on location, available resources, and the attitudes of individual camp commanders. Tang survivors found themselves subject to forced labor assignments, inadequate nutrition, and medical neglect that reflected both Japanese resource limitations and deliberate policies designed to weaken prisoner resistance and morale. International law regarding prisoner-of-war treatment, as established by the Geneva Conventions, theoretically provided protections for captured military personnel that Japanese authorities had agreed to observe. However, the practical enforcement of these protections remained inconsistent throughout Japanese-controlled territory, with some camps maintaining minimal standards while others subjected prisoners to treatment that clearly violated international agreements. The psychological warfare aspects of prisoner treatment included efforts by Japanese authorities to extract propaganda statements from captured American personnel, particularly those with high profiles like Commander O'Kane. These efforts typically involved combinations of physical hardship, psychological pressure, and occasional incentives designed to encourage cooperation with enemy propaganda efforts. Educational and recreational activities available to prisoners of war varied dramatically between different Japanese facilities, with some camps providing minimal opportunities for prisoner self-improvement, while others allowed limited access to reading materials, educational discussions, or recreational activities. Tang survivors often organized informal educational programs to maintain mental alertness and morale during extended captivity periods. The geographic distribution of Japanese prisoner-of-war camps reflected strategic considerations about prisoner security, labor requirements, and transportation capabilities. Tang survivors found themselves transferred between different facilities as Japanese authorities balanced competing demands for prisoner labor against security concerns about maintaining experienced military personnel in any single location. Intelligence gathering by prisoners of war represented a continuous challenge for Japanese camp administrators, who understood that experienced military personnel would attempt to collect information about Japanese capabilities, resources, and morale that could prove valuable if escape opportunities arose or if prisoners were eventually liberated by Allied forces advancing through Japanese-controlled territory. The leadership dynamics among prisoner groups often reflected pre-capture military hierarchies, with senior officers like Commander O'Kane assuming responsibility for prisoner welfare and resistance to Japanese demands that violated military codes of conduct. These leadership roles created additional burdens for senior personnel who faced pressure from both Japanese authorities and fellow prisoners. Sabotage opportunities within prisoner of war camps remained limited, but were occasionally exploited by prisoners assigned to labor details involving military production or transportation systems. Japanese authorities maintained constant vigilance against such activities, while prisoners sought ways to contribute to the war effort despite their captive status. The medical condition of prisoners deteriorated throughout 1944 and 1945 as Japanese resources became increasingly strained by Allied military pressure and strategic bombing campaigns. Malnutrition, disease, and inadequate medical care created mortality rates among prisoners that reflected both Japanese resource limitations and policy decisions about prisoner welfare priorities. News about the war's progress reached prisoners through various channels, including Japanese propaganda broadcasts, clandestine radio reception, and information smuggled by sympathetic guards or civilian workers. Tang survivors, like other American prisoners, sought any available information about Allied military progress that might indicate approaching liberation. The psychological impact of prolonged captivity created mental health challenges that varied among individual prisoners depending on their personal resilience, leadership roles, and relationships with fellow prisoners. Some Tang survivors developed techniques for maintaining psychological health, while others struggled with depression, anxiety, and other stress-related conditions throughout their imprisonment. Japanese attitudes towards submarine prisoners evolved throughout the war as the devastating effectiveness of American submarine operations became increasingly apparent to enemy military leaders. Initial curiosity about submarine capabilities sometimes gave way to outright hostility as Japanese personnel recognized the strategic impact of maritime interdiction on their nation's war effort. The documentation of prisoner status and conditions remained inconsistent throughout Japanese-controlled territory, with some facilities maintaining detailed records while others provided minimal documentation of prisoner numbers, health conditions, or treatment. This inconsistency would later complicate Allied efforts to locate and account for all prisoners following Japan's surrender. Cultural misunderstandings between American prisoners and Japanese guards created ongoing tensions that sometimes erupted into serious conflicts requiring intervention by camp administrators. Different concepts of military honor, prisoner rights, and appropriate behavior created friction that complicated daily interactions between captors and prisoners. The liberation of Tang survivors in August 1945, following Japan's surrender, marked the end of nearly 10 months of captivity, during which they had witnessed the final collapse of Japanese military resistance from a unique perspective within enemy territory. Their experiences provided valuable intelligence about Japanese prisoner treatment, military capabilities, and civilian morale during the war's final phase. Medical evaluation of liberated Tang survivors revealed the physical and psychological toll of extended captivity under increasingly difficult conditions. Weight loss, malnutrition-related diseases, and stress-related disorders required extensive medical treatment that sometimes continued for months or years following their liberation from Japanese prisoner of war camps. The posthumous recognition of the USS Tang's achievements began even before the war's end, as American naval intelligence analysts compiled detailed assessments of submarine effectiveness that revealed the extraordinary nature of the Tang's combat record. Statistical analysis confirmed that Commander O'Kane's submarine had achieved the highest success rate of any American submarine in terms of enemy vessels destroyed per patrol, establishing benchmarks for submarine effectiveness that would influence naval doctrine for decades to come. The Medal of Honor, awarded to Commander Richard O'Kane, recognized not only his personal courage and tactical brilliance, but also represented acknowledgement of the crucial role played by submarine warfare in achieving victory in the Pacific theater. O'Kane's citation specifically mentioned his aggressive leadership during the Tang's final two engagements, where exceptional seamanship and tactical innovation had resulted in the destruction of 13 enemy vessels during a single patrol. Academic study of the Tang's tactical methods began immediately after World War II, as naval war colleges and military historians sought to identify the factors that had made certain submarine crews exceptionally effective, while others achieved only modest results under similar conditions. Analysis revealed that the Tang's success resulted from a combination of superior leadership, aggressive tactics, improved technology, and exceptional crew training that created synergistic effects exceeding the sum of individual components. The technological lessons learned from the Tang's operations influenced submarine design and construction programs throughout the Cold War period, as naval architects incorporated insights gained from World War II combat experience into new generations of submarine systems. Improvements in torpedo reliability, sonar capabilities, and submarine construction reflected direct responses to problems identified during operations like those conducted by the Tang. Memorial services for the Tang's crew members reflected the special place that submarine personnel held within American naval tradition, recognizing the exceptional risks and sacrifices associated with underwater warfare. The loss of 78 crew members during the Tang's final engagement represented one of the highest single-incident casualty totals for any American submarine during World War II, emphasizing the dangerous nature of submarine operations. The strategic assessment of submarine warfare's contribution to Allied victory in the Pacific concluded that maritime interdiction had achieved results equivalent to a successful economic blockade, effectively strangling Japanese industrial capabilities and military logistics. The Tang's individual contributions to this strategic success, while spectacular in their own right, represented part of a coordinated campaign that had fundamentally altered the balance of power in the Pacific theater. Educational programs developed by the United States Navy after World War II incorporated detailed case studies of Tang operations as examples of exceptional submarine tactics and leadership under combat conditions. These programs sought to identify transferable principles that could improve the effectiveness of future submarine crews, ensuring that lessons learned through the Tang sacrifice would benefit subsequent generations of submarine personnel. The psychological study of submarine warfare effectiveness revealed that crew morale and unit cohesion played crucial roles in determining operational success, with submarines like the Tang achieving superior results partly through exceptional team dynamics and shared confidence in their capabilities. These insights influence personnel selection and training programs designed to replicate the organizational culture that had made the Tang's crew so effective. International recognition of American submarine achievements during World War II included specific acknowledgement of the Tang's contributions to Allied victory, with foreign naval observers studying American submarine tactics and technology as models for their own submarine forces. The global influence of American submarine doctrine reflected the demonstrated effectiveness of operations like those conducted by the Tang throughout the Pacific theater. The technical analysis of the Tang's final torpedo malfunction provided crucial insights that led to improved torpedo design and testing procedures. ensuring that future submarine crews would not face the same technical failures that had destroyed the most successful American submarine of World War II. These engineering improvements represented direct responses to the tragic circumstances surrounding the Tang's loss. Museum exhibits commemorating the Tang's service began appearing in naval museums and memorial installations throughout the United States, providing public education about submarine warfare while honoring the sacrifice of submarine crews during World War II. These exhibits often featured artifacts recovered from Tang survivors and detailed accounts of the submarine's combat operations. The literary and cinematic treatment of the Tang's story contributed to public understanding of submarine warfare while preserving historical memory of the submarine's achievements and ultimate sacrifice. Books, documentaries, and feature films drew inspiration from the Tang's dramatic combat record and tragic conclusion, ensuring that the submarine's story would reach audiences far beyond military and naval history specialists. Research into the long-term effects of submarine warfare on Japanese society and economy revealed that operations like those conducted by the Tang had created lasting changes in Japanese industrial capabilities and maritime infrastructure. The destruction of merchant shipping during World War II had eliminated not only immediate transportation capabilities, but also the experienced personnel and institutional knowledge necessary for rapid maritime recovery. The development of submarine rescue and escape technology during the post-war period reflected lessons learned from the Tang disaster, where mechanical escape devices had saved only a small fraction of the crew members who had survived the initial torpedo explosion. Improved escape systems and rescue capabilities represented direct responses to the limitations revealed during the Tang's final moments. Veteran reunions and memorial associations formed by Tang survivors and their families created ongoing communities that preserved historical memory while providing support for individuals affected by the submarine's loss. These organizations often participated in naval ceremonies and educational programs that honored submarine service while sharing first-hand accounts of submarine operations during World War II. The strategic doctrine development that emerged from World War II submarine operations incorporated many tactical innovations pioneered by crews like those aboard the Tang, establishing principles of submarine warfare that influenced naval planning throughout the Cold War period. The aggressive approach to submarine operations demonstrated by Commander O'Kane became a standard model for submarine commanders facing similar tactical situations. Academic conferences and professional military education programs regularly featured presentations about Tang operations as case studies in military leadership, tactical innovation, and organizational effectiveness under extreme conditions. These educational applications ensured that the Tang's experiences continued to contribute to professional military development long after the submarine's loss. The technological legacy of World War II submarine operations extended beyond military applications to influence civilian maritime technology, underwater exploration capabilities, and oceanographic research equipment. Many innovations developed for submarine warfare found peacetime applications that contributed to scientific understanding of ocean environments and underwater engineering challenges. International submarine forces studied American World War II submarine operations, including detailed analysis of Tang tactics and results, as they developed their own submarine capabilities during the Cold War period. The global influence of American submarine doctrine reflected the demonstrated effectiveness of operations conducted by submarines like the Tang throughout the Pacific theater. The historical preservation efforts surrounding Tang records and artifacts ensured that detailed documentation of the submarine's operations remained available for future researchers and historians studying submarine warfare, naval strategy, and military technology development during World War II. These preservation efforts reflected recognition of the Tang's historical significance within American naval tradition. The continuing relevance of Tang tactical innovations became apparent during subsequent conflicts, where submarine operations played important roles, with naval commanders drawing inspiration from World War II examples of aggressive submarine tactics and innovative approaches to underwater warfare. The Tang's legacy influenced submarine operations far beyond the specific historical context of the Pacific War. The memorial services and commemorative events that honor Tang crew members reflect broader American traditions of military remembrance, while specifically recognizing the unique sacrifices associated with submarine service. These ceremonies often emphasize both the exceptional achievements of the Tang's crew and the tragic circumstances surrounding the submarine's loss. The educational value of the Tang's story extends beyond military history to encompass broader themes of leadership, teamwork, technological innovation, and individual courage under extreme circumstances. These universal themes ensure that the Tang's legacy remains relevant to diverse audiences interested in human achievement and sacrifice during one of history's most challenging periods. The continuing study of Tang operations by military historians and naval analysts reflects ongoing interest in understanding the factors that create exceptional military effectiveness, with the submarine's record providing insights applicable to contemporary military challenges and organizational development. The Tang's achievements continue to inspire and inform military professionals decades after World War II's conclusion. The waters of the Taiwan Strait remain forever marked by the final resting place of the USS Tang, where 180 feet beneath the surface lies one of the most successful warships in American naval history. The submarine's brief but spectacular career lasted only 14 months from commissioning to loss. Yet during that time, she achieved results that established new standards for submarine effectiveness and tactical innovation that influenced naval warfare for generations to come. The 33 Japanese ships destroyed by the Tang represented more than statistical achievements. Each sinking struck directly at Japan's ability to sustain military operations throughout their extended Pacific Empire. The 116,554 tons of enemy shipping sent to the bottom by Commander O'Kane and his crew contributed significantly to the maritime interdiction campaign that ultimately strangled Japanese industrial capabilities and hastened the war's conclusion. The human cost of the Tang's success cannot be separated from her military achievements. The loss of 78 American sailors during the submarine's final engagement, combined with the 10 months of captivity endured by the 9 survivors, exemplifies the personal sacrifices that underpinned Allied victory in the Pacific theater. These men paid the ultimate price for their exceptional service to their nation and the cause of freedom. The technical failure that destroyed the Tang serves as a sobering reminder that even the most advanced military technology remains subject to mechanical failures that can transform weapons intended for enemy destruction into instruments of self-destruction. The circular run of the Tang's final torpedo represented a tragic irony that has resonated throughout naval history as both a technological cautionary tale and a testament to the inherent dangers of submarine warfare. Commander Richard O'Kane's survival and eventual liberation allowed him to share the story of his submarine's achievements while ensuring that the sacrifice of his crew members would not be forgotten. His Medal of Honor recognized not only individual courage, but also the collective excellence of the entire Tang crew, whose professionalism and dedication had created one of the most effective military units in American history. The strategic impact of submarine operations like those conducted by the Tang extended far beyond immediate tactical results to influence the entire course of the Pacific War. The systematic destruction of Japanese merchant shipping by American submarines created economic pressures that complemented traditional military campaigns, demonstrating the multifaceted nature of modern warfare where economic and military objectives frequently intersected. The legacy of the USS Tang continues to inspire submarine crews and naval officers throughout the world, providing examples of tactical innovation, aggressive leadership, and exceptional teamwork under the most challenging circumstances imaginable. The submarine's story remains a cornerstone of American naval tradition, while serving as a testament to the courage and skill of the submarine crews who fought the silent war beneath the Pacific's surface. Today, the Tang rests in her final patrol area, surrounded by the waters where she achieved her greatest victories and suffered her ultimate defeat. Her crew members have joined the ranks of submarine veterans who earned the respect of their enemies while serving their nation with distinction during one of history's most decisive conflicts. Their sacrifice ensures that the Tang's name will forever be associated with the highest traditions of American naval service and the eternal vigilance required to preserve freedom in an uncertain world. The Japanese indeed could not believe that a single submarine had sunk dozens of their warships and merchant vessels. The Tang's remarkable record stands as proof that exceptional individuals, working together with superior technology and innovative tactics, can achieve results that seem impossible under normal circumstances. Her story reminds us that individual courage and collective excellence remain the foundation of military success, regardless of technological advancement or strategic complexity. Final statistics: total ships sunk 33 vessels, total tonnage destroyed 116,454 tons, combat patrols 5 crew, lost 78 officers and enlisted men, survivors 9 including Commander O'Kane, awards: Medal of Honor, O'Kane, 2 Presidential Unit Citations, 4 Battlestar Service Period, October 15, 1943, October 24, 1944, the USS Tang's extraordinary service record established her as the most successful American submarine of World War II, while her tragic loss serves as an eternal reminder of the courage and sacrifice that secured victory in the Pacific theater.